This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
The entire Houston region is picking up the pieces after Hurricane Beryl battered the Texas coast and crossed over the city and its suburbs. Even though it made landfall as a Category 1 hurricane and later was downgraded to a tropical storm, its strong winds surprised even some veteran meteorologists and left at least 2 people dead and millions without power. The CityCast Houston team is also without power, including our host, Raheel Ramzanali, so I'm filling in. My street got flooded, and I actually had to go to my neighbor's house where I'm standing in a closet to try and get away from the noise of their generator. You may hear it in the background. So far, we're okay, and we're hoping that you and your loved ones are okay too. To get a handle on the impact and recovery after Hurricane Beryl, I'm talking with Justin Ballard, the Houston Chronicle's newsroom meteorologist. It's Tuesday, July 9th. I'm Laura Eisensee, filling in for host Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Justin, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us here at CityCast Houston. How are you doing with the storm?
We are still in recovery mode, so we're safe. We're making do with what we have, which is not a whole lot at this point in terms of power, but that's fine.
Yeah, I feel you. And in fact, almost the whole CityCast team, we're also without power, but we are trying to get y'all the news that you need to know. I guess to kick it off, when you look at all the different storms that have hit Houston in recent years, like Harvey, the derecho, Ike, even way back to Tropical Storm Allison, how do you think Beryl stacks up so far with what we know?
Yeah, I mean, as far as let's first say, Beryl was in no way, shape, or form, at least in terms of rainfall, comparable to Hurricane Harvey in 2017. That's good news, and I probably didn't need to explicitly say that because everyone probably knows that. But, we've not had a true-blown sort of hurricane wind event like this since Ike, and that's been since 2008. So it's now been 16 years. Mm-hmm. So a lot of us have kind of lost our muscle memory to hurricanes and to what kind of wind impacts, at least, that they can bring. Beryl was a reminder that Houston specifically isn't necessarily a quote unquote coastal city. It certainly can see hurricane force winds and hurricane force problems.
Yeah. And you said we've kind of lost our muscle memory. There's also a lot of new folks to Houston who've moved here since Ike. And so this is a totally new experience for them. I want to step back for a second. Beryl was, had formed and was moving through the Caribbean. And, a week ago, the forecast said that Houston was basically in the clear. It wasn't expected to be impacted. We were anticipating a landfall in Mexico, and we were thinking, hey, man, we dodged a bullet. But now we just had a Category 1 hurricane move through Houston, leaving a lot of damage and recovery. What happened there?
Well, this is a very typical part of a tropical storm season or a tropical season, we'll call it. Being able to communicate to the public that we've got an all clear, if you will, from a landfalling tropical system is hard to do a week out. Mm-hmm. So that's why we encourage folks, especially when a system enters the Caribbean, like Beryl did, never mind the fact if it enters the Gulf, we tell people, pay attention. Pay attention to the forecast. Don't look at that cone from a week ago and go, okay, I'm good. Because that cone will most surely change. Even up until, I worked Saturday and Sunday this weekend, kind of monitoring the evolution of Beryl. And even from Friday to Saturday, there were changes in the track forecast that basically took Corpus Christi out of the equation and put Matagorda Bay, the area between basically Matagorda Bay and Freeport,
Hmm.
at risk of Beryl. So those day-to-day changes, even hourly changes or every couple of hour changes, can be really important to staying safe and staying informed during hurricane season. So it's really about, monitoring the forecast. Once you see a hurricane or something tropical, it doesn't have to be a hurricane, enter the Caribbean. That's when you want to start really paying attention. You don't necessarily have to see the forecast every single day. I know we're all busy people, but check in at least every other day,
Yeah.
if possible. And once that hurricane or that tropical storm makes it into the Gulf, that's when you check in every single day, multiple times a day at that.
Yeah, well, I was definitely one of those, I don't want to say doom scrolling. Let's call it hurricane scrolling, checking the Instagram updates, definitely following you at the
Hmm.
Houston Chronicle and the other great meteorologists and weather reporters in our region. We're really so grateful for all the updates you've been giving us throughout this storm and the recovery. That's a great note for looking ahead because we got a few months left of this tropical storm season.
Yes. Few
Unfortunately.
very long months. Yes.
Yes. But let's talk more about Beryl and what we know so far. When it hit, as you said, near Matagorda Bay and moved through the Houston suburbs and the Houston Metroplex, and we saw millions of people without power. What do we know about the extent of the damage so far?
I think the true extent of damage will really come to light, I think, over the next day or so. It's hard to get a really good grasp on just how widespread damage is, in the 24 hours or so following a landfalling tropical storm or hurricane. I really think as we go through by midweek, I think we'll have a really good idea of just how much damage was caused in this area by Beryl. I mean, without a doubt, there will be people without power for days, possibly a week or more in Southeast Texas. I mean, just look at the derecho as kind of a guide, if you will, for how long people were without power. Not nearly as many people were without power during the derecho, at least in Harris County, as they are currently in Houston.
Yeah.
So, or Houston and Harris County with Beryl. So this will be a long recovery process for people who are without power.
Yeah, and that derecho that hit the Houston area in mid-May, I mean,
Hmm.
I feel like that's really fresh in a lot of people's minds. And
Yes.
I got to say, I mean, some of us were without power for a week with that. So that's really great to put this in context that this impact is more than what we saw with the derecho, is what I'm hearing you say.
I mean, even though the winds necessarily with Beryl weren't quite as strong as what they were with the derecho, if you're looking at, tit for tat. But I mean, we had 70, 80 mile per hour gusts for several hours.
Mm,
And that did a number on the power system or power grid.
yeah. And sadly, we've seen at least 2 fatalities
Hmm.
from falling trees, and we definitely hope that that number does not increase, that there's not more loss of life.
And that's
Um,
in addition to I don't know the exact number, but there were several fatalities in the Caribbean as well as Beryl moved through.
thank you for adding that. Yes, so really a deadly storm. Was there anything that surprised you about Hurricane Beryl?
I think so much of what uh, what surprises me about Hurricane Beryl was not necessarily, its impact to Southeast Texas, its impact to Houston. I think its life, if you will, before it made landfall on the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. I think that the pre Yucatan Beryl is what's surprising to me the most. I mean, it really passed a lot of superlatives in the Atlantic basin in terms of intensity, in terms of the early nature of it. I mean, it truly was a record in many, many aspects, right? It formed late June, became a hurricane on June 30th. The same day that it became a hurricane, it became a major hurricane.
Okay.
We saw rapid intensification in 48 hours, take it from a tropical depression to tropical storm to hurricane to major hurricane, right? Which is Cat 3, Cat 4, or Cat 5.
Yeah.
Um, and where it formed, it was also notable. I was actually speaking. It's funny you asked this question. 1 week ago, I was speaking with someone who he's a researcher at Colorado State University, Dr. Philip Klotzbach. He basically gave me some context. He was like, if Beryl had formed in any other area of the Atlantic, if it had formed in the Gulf of Mexico, if it had formed in the Caribbean, if it had formed in any other area of the Atlantic, besides where it formed, he said, I wouldn't necessarily be worried that this is some kind of harbinger to come for what's ahead for the rest of the season. He said, but the fact that Beryl formed so early and so rapidly and very quickly became a very intense hurricane in what's called the main development region. It's basically an area of the Atlantic that basically exists from the Cabo Verde Islands to around the Yucatan Peninsula. That area of the Atlantic is where 75% of Cat 3, Cat 4, or 5 hurricanes form.
Okay.
And those typically occur in August and September. So what you think of would be the peak, right? But Beryl formed well ahead of that. The earliest major hurricane, the earliest Cat 5 to form was 2005's Emily. And that was 2 weeks after Beryl formed. So that just gives you an idea of just how record-breaking Beryl was. It formed 2 weeks earlier than the earliest Cat 5 hurricane on record in the Atlantic. And it was a B-named storm.
And it was a B named storm. So B meaning
Yes.
super
Beryl.
early in the season. I mean, we started with
Yep.
A and now we're on B. So literally the second named storm of the season is a major hurricane.
And a lot of people forget we're already 3 names deep into the season. Chris formed at about the same time Beryl formed.
Okay.
But it made landfall in Mexico with little fanfare, at least in Houston, certainly.
Yeah.
Because at that point, all eyes were on Beryl and where Beryl was going to go.
Want to know one of my favorite sounds? Here it is. That's the sound I hear when I'm learning Spanish with Babbel. And if you want to learn a new language this year, I guarantee it'll be one of your favorite sounds too. I'm David Plotz. I'm the CEO of CityCast, and I've been doing Babbel for a few weeks, and it's been so much fun. This week, I've been learning lots of food vocabulary and how to order in a restaurant. This is one of the things I love about Babbel, is that it's about learning the language so that you can use it. As Babbel says, it's designed by real people for real conversation. So it's all based on real life situations. And these restaurant lessons are awesome. When I went to Mexico City last year with my girlfriend, I was a mute. But next time, I'm going to be ordering the sopes and las salsas picantes. Babbel has over 16 million subscriptions sold, plus all of Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. Here's a special limited-time deal for CityCast listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for CityCast listeners at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
So kind of thinking about what you just walked us through in terms of the records that Beryl has already set in terms of where it formed, how early it formed, how quickly it intensified. What do you think this means for the rest of the hurricane season?
I think it means that we absolutely in Houston cannot let our guard down. I mean, the next week or so look quiet in the tropics, mercifully quiet, might I add. But we really, really cannot let our guard down, especially August into September. Mid-August to mid-September is when we see the most landfalls of hurricanes, Cat 3, 4, 5 hurricane, really any hurricane for that matter, if we can get through late September, we should be able to breathe maybe a little bit easier. But we have a long way to go before we can get to that.
Yeah, we have a long way until we can really exhale. But in the meantime, with the immediate aftermath of Beryl, what do you think recovery is going to look like? How long do you think people should be prepared to be without power? And do you have any advice of how they can make the best of it if it's more than a couple of days?
I certainly am not an expert in how quickly it takes for power restoration, but I mean, I've been telling folks, if you've lost power, you're likely going to be without power for, I would say, at least 18 to 24 hours, because at the end of the day, their crews are not going to be able to safely go out until wind gusts start dropping. I do think that as we go into the midweek and beyond period, more and more people, will start seeing their lights come back on, and we'll all be able to enjoy that good old Texas AC, right?
Yeah.
But we've got several days likely before we start seeing really significant dents in the number of power outages that we have.
Okay. And what's your strategy to make the best of it? I mean, do you have AC right now?
I do not. Lost power at 6:30 Monday morning, and we are still without power. And I'm comfortable. I'm a little warm, but
Yeah.
I'm comfortable. I've got those little hand fans
Oh,
that
yeah.
are
Yeah.
chargeable. Yeah, I've got those. Got little handheld fans that you use to wave yourself with. So, it's all about finding your comfort. I
Hmm.
know it's an inconvenience.
Yeah.
I was 30 minutes into darkness, if you will, and I was like, oh, okay, well, my homemade ice cream that I made is going to melt. It's not going to be good. So I went ahead and got it out of the freezer and started eating it because I just needed that excuse to start eating ice cream at 6:30 in the morning. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, you're in the middle of a hurricane. You got to take those
Hurricane
small,
snacks.
yeah, hurricane snacks, those hurricane snacks.
Hmm.
Um, well, just two more questions. We never want to have a big storm come through Houston. And like you said, we haven't really seen a major event in a while. And here we are with Hurricane Beryl. But do you think there were any silver linings to the storm?
Oh, yeah. My biggest concern with Beryl on late last week was that Beryl would thread the needle between the west coast of Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula. And it would not have very much interaction with the Yucatan Peninsula. It didn't have a whole lot with the track that it took, but it had just enough so that there was an area of an upper level low that was able to kind of rip apart some of Beryl over the Gulf of Mexico, and between that and its interaction with land over the Yucatan, it really did save us from getting, a Cat 2, 3, or 4 hurricane. Certainly, water temperatures off the Gulf Coast or off the coast are 85, 90 degrees. There was plenty of warmth to support the development of a pretty big hurricane if it took a certain path. But thankfully, it did not take that certain path. So Houston, yes, we got walloped, and we got walloped, but good. But we did dodge a pretty big bullet from Beryl, given its path that it did take.
Yeah, so its path kind of hitting off the coast of the Yucatan and not just staying over the
Mhm.
water. If it had stayed over the water, we would be in an even bigger mess, potentially.
Correct.
Well, I'm going to hold on to that as we live through some time without power, and definitely folks who are suffering even more hardships. Our thoughts are with you. We are going to be keeping everyone updated. Justin, thank you so much for your time. And real quick before we wrap up, is there anything else that you think folks should know about Beryl or hurricane season?
Yeah. Last week when I talked with Dr. Philip Klutzbach, which I mentioned earlier, he works at the Colorado State University. He's a tropical researcher, meteorologist, and one of the things that he pointed out was that when you look at past hurricane seasons, 2005 is actually a season where the meteorological variables are really similar then as they are to now in 2024. We call those analog years. So analog years basically meaning that ingredients were similar back then as they are to this year.
Okay.
So that is, when you hear someone say that 2005 is an analog to the current year you're in, that kind of gives you pause. That gives you a chill because, if you remember, we had Katrina in 2005 affect New Orleans, obviously, but just a few months later, Rita moved through or came close to Houston and Southeast Texas, and that was a nightmare for evacuations.
Yeah, it really was. And it hit Beaumont. I got family in
Yes.
Beaumont, and that was not pretty.
Right. And Houston, from at least what I've heard, barely saw a drop of rain from Rita. So it really does come down to, now is not the time to be worried. Now is the time to prepare. The best time to prepare for hurricane season is before hurricane season. If you did not do that before Beryl, or if you did not do that before the start of the hurricane season, you've got time once you're out of recovery mode from Beryl. Get those hurricane supplies that you need to keep you and your family safe. That way you can keep your sanity, when the next big thing does come.
Thank you so much for that advice. And thank you again for coming and joining us today, Justin. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Again, that was Justin Ballard, newsroom meteorologist for the Houston Chronicle. We'll link to his page in the show notes. For more information and resources on what to do after the storm, visit readyharris.org or call 211. More links will also be in our show notes. That's our show for today on CityCast Houston. Let us know how you fared during the storm. If this episode was helpful to you, why not tell a friend? Rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to Hey Houston, our daily newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow, rain or shine. Bye for now, and stay safe. Just bear with me. I am also on a very, let's say, makeshift studio system right here.
Well, I'm in a closet, so your setup is already more advanced than mine.
No, I'm also in a closet. I'm also in a closet.